In the previous chapter, you learned how to navigate around Notch Builder. Now it is time to start using the tool, and we'll start by adding effects to videos. In this chapter, we'll build both simple and more advanced post-effect processing chains. We'll learn how to stack multiple effects on top of each other and change their properties. This chapter features multiple workshops where I ask you to follow along with the video and repeat what I'm doing to learn for yourself. Feel free to pause or rewind the video if you need to. Welcome to Chapter 2, Video Compositing and Post Effects. In this chapter, we will talk about video processing in Notch. Now, before we delve into the workshops, I'm just going to mention that I opened the 02 chapter, Video Compositing and Post Effects. And once I have it open, I see that there's some videos that fail to load. So let's talk a little bit about file handling in Notch. If the video comes in with a red markup and the message failed to load, that means that the path to a linked video is broken, so we can reestablish that. I'm going to right click and go for Find Missing Resource. Then I'm going to click on these little three dots and I'm going to navigate to the folder that holds assets for video. So Notch Essential Assets Video. I am in the right place here. So it looks like it's not populated with videos, this folder, but if I go to the file structure in Windows, I will see that there are videos indeed. Now, the reason why we see none of those here in Notch UI is because we are referring to a specific location, not to a specific video. So not seeing your video assets here is totally fine. I'm going to hit Select Folder. Okay, and I see that all my videos now are relinked. If you choose to have your videos embedded to your Notch file, you can right-click and untick Do Not Embed Resource. As you see, now the video file is marked up white, hence it's actually embedded in a DFX file. The reason why we don't embed files by default is so we could save the overall size of your work files. If you're working with media servers, very likely you're using these videos only as a reference point and you're gonna swap them out with the actual camera feed in your final design. So we choose not to embed the videos into the work file. This is a common practice in majority of 2D and 3D applications as well. Now, this embedding workflow is true only to video. Images, textures, 3D objects, sound files, all of them will always be included in your DFX file. So it's only the videos that are embedded or linked externally. Right, so with that said, let's discuss a couple of most common ways of outputting video via Notch. So we have two specific nodes that corresponds with those tasks. So it's image 2D and image plane. So let's talk about image 2D first. So if I connect that to the root, I see that all of a sudden my viewport is filled in with the white canvas. Image 2D always grabs all available space in a viewport and fills it in. Now, if I was to go to Project Settings, Rendering, and change the width of this setup to 3840 by 1080, all of a sudden you will see that this image 2D actually corresponded and adapted to a changed canvas size. Alternatively, image plane lives in 3D space and it's available for you in any and all positional values. So if you're building a 3D scene that requires an image plane, this is exactly the node that you would use. So in this specific workshop, we will focus on 2D workflows. So I'm going to delete the image plane and I'm going to focus on image 2D. So I'm connecting it to the root. I think I'm going to go back to Project Settings, Rendering, and I'm going to change the width of this setup to original or the default 1920 by 1080. Right, so now we have a quad of an output, but we don't have any video to output. So let's grab one of the videos available in resources. I'm going to go for base. First off, I'm going to connect it to the image 2D, and then we're going to talk about different and all properties available in image 2D and in video loader. This node came in hashed out gray, implying that it needs some kind of a connection to actually be useful, to actually be rendered. Now, if I hover over the output and click on it, I will see all the plausible hookups for this specific node. So in this case, image 2D has 3 inputs that can correspond with the output of the video loader. So that's video node, alpha image, and UV remap image. I'm going to go for the first one, video node. And as I press space, I see this video being played out by image 2D now. Great. So let's talk about attributes in video loader and image 2D. So Video Loader has a preview in the viewport option, which will make more sense and will be more applicable as we build more complex setups. It has a video dropdown, so any and all videos that we have in our resources can be accessed via this dropdown. So you don't really need to bring in one by one or reconnect it. You can just literally choose it from the dropdown. You can set in specific frame rates and you can actually flip it on the X and Y axis. So basically you can treat the signal in any way you need and you feel necessary. Image 2D is an output module, so you can position it in 2D space. You can crop it and you can change blend modes. There are various other properties that are very handy and we're going to discover them as we progress through the course. Now, with this initial setup completed, let's add some post effects. I think I'm going to start with glow. As soon as I connect glow to the root, I see that it's activated. I'm going to add one more node. I'm going to go for edge detect. Now let's make our edge detect a little bit wider. So in the width property, I'm going to set 2. Now notice what happens if I change the positional values of these two nodes. Stacking order in Notch is very important. So if Notch doesn't recognize the stacking order from top to bottom, it would go for left to right. So by changing the positional values of our post effects, we can actually change the design of our setup quite significantly. And that's true to quite a few other systems in Notch. Another big thing to mention about post effects, majority of them actually have different blend modes. So in this case, under the edge detect, I think I'm going to choose something else, perhaps difference. And I see that my glow is rather hard. So under the glow node, I'm going to increase the threshold. Yes, I think this looks much better now. In fact, I can come back to edge detect and give it a color. For instance, maybe red. Great. Now, probably we should add some more creative post effects. I think I'm going to go for motion data mesh. As I connect it to the root, I see it's taking place. I think I would like to tick on use scene motion vectors. And I think I should scroll through different blend modes and choose something a little bit less aggressive, so we actually see the video a little bit better. I'm quite happy with dodge. I think I'm going to keep that. Now, it would be a lot to expect for you guys to know exactly how every single post effect looks from the get-go, so there are some aids there. So if you right-click on the node in the node list, you can actually go straight to the manual page corresponding with that specific post effect. And you will have a little visual representation of the node and its rigging setup. You can access the very same manual page straight from the node graph as well, if you press on the question mark here in the top corner of properties. Another handy tip, if you go straight to the top of the post effects entry in the manual, you will be presented with small icons of every single post effect available in Notch. So this should help you understand and imagine how one or the other post effect looks and applies. So with that said, I think I'm going to add one more post effect, vector blur, and I'm going to connect it to the root. It's a little bit harsh. I think I'm going to reduce the steps to something like 20. Maybe our orientation could be changed to, let's say, 200. And I'm going to decrease the dampening a lot. Right, I think this is a good time to try out different post effects available in our post effect list. And again, there's quite a few of them here. And once we are good and satisfied with what we achieved, we will move on to the next workshop, which is advanced post-processing. Welcome back to the workshops. So far we covered basic video processing and basic post effects. I think it's good time to move on to a little bit more advanced setup. So I'm pressing on timeline. I'm just going to point out that there's several designs already pre-built for you. Now, we're going to be building something very alike to this setting right here, the number 3. But once we're going to be done with the workshop, you'll be able to recreate any and all of these settings and likely make something even better and much nicer looking. So with that said, I'm making a new layer now. So I'm going to right click on an empty space here and I'm going to choose Insert Layer option. I'm going to call this layer Composite. Right, with that done, I'm going to go back to the node graph and I'm going to start building my initial setup. First node that we're going to use is absolutely the same one as in a previous setting. image 2D. Right, so as I connect it to the root, I see that it's filling the available space with white quad. That's great. Now we need some kind of a video as an output. So I'm going to grab the very same base. So what if we want to build a little bit more intricate processing chain? For instance, perhaps I want to have red outlines on this video, and those outlines should be expressed with little dots. And the video in the back or beneath it should be black and white. So how would I go about it? Obviously, I could try to use some blend modes in Post Effects, or I can actually build a little processing chain with nulls here. I think I'm going to go for that. So as you see, we have quite a few nulls to choose from. In this case, we're going to be talking about a video null. So that's the last option here in this list. Right, so first of all, I'm going to daisy chain these nodes. So video loader to video null and null to the image 2D first input. And I guess the best way to describe what video null does is literally to show how it behaves with post effects. But before I add any post effects, I want to make sure that we can see how does this null and this video loader look. So I'm going to shift double click on the video loader and I'm going to shift double click on the null. As you see, null is a direct copy of the video loader. I'm going to leave some comments here so we actually understand which one is the loader and which one is the null. I can do that by adding a comment node. Video loader. And let's call this video null1, as we will add more. Great. So, post effects. I'm going to go for edge detect. Notice what happens if I connect edge detect to the video loader. All of a sudden, this edge detect is inherited by video null, and then output it to the image 2D. I'm going to make this edge detect a little bit more prominent, so I'm going to set it to 2 iterations in width. But look what happens if I connect this edge detect to the video null. All of a sudden, our video loader is actually intact, so it's clean. Great. So before I move on, I think I'm going to color my edge detect to a red color. And I'm going to add those dots, as I mentioned before. So I think dot matrix will be a perfect node to achieve the briefing that we discussed in the beginning of the workshop. There we go. Now we have little dots on the edges. Okay, so let's build a separate chain here for the black and white pass. I'm going to go ahead and grab yet another video null. I'm going to connect it to the video loader. Let's expand it so we see how it looks. So shift double click and let's give it a name. So I'm going to copy and paste the comment node and I'm going to call this video null 2. So for the bottom one, we've said that we want to have it in black and white. I'm going to go for color correction node. Now, mind you, color is the British color with the U. So be aware and type it in with the U. So with that done, I think I can go for saturation and just zero it out. There we go. Now it's in black and white. So the next step here would be to merge those two video nulls back together so we can see both of the settings combined. So for that, we have a specific node and it's called Composite Sources. I'm going to bring that to the scene and I'm going to unhook this video null from the image 2D. As now we have one chain processing and this one is completely disregarded. So we're going to use Composite Sources to connect those two video nulls and then output it to the image 2D. Right, so I'm connecting video null to the first input here on the left-hand side and the second video null to the first in the bottom. So why are we using two inputs for the same node? And they actually state quite similar naming conventions. So composite source and composite sources and composite source. Well, they fulfill a little bit different tasks. So the top one is actually driving the frame rate and driving the resolution. So if my video null 1 or this video here would be 4K, the bottom video would be upscaled to 4K as well. Same thing with the frame rate. If this one would be set to 60, this video right here would be upscaled to 60 FPS as well. So this is more or less a parent or a driver, and this is the follower. So with both of those nodes now connected to the composite sources, I can connect the very node to the image 2D for the output. And there we go. Now we're outputting the unified signal via composite source to the image 2D. So let's talk about different settings in the composite sources node. First of all, we have blend amount, so we can actually choose whichever the source is being outputted. So it's like a little switch. Now clearly that's not exactly what we're going for. We actually want to see them both at the same time. So I'm going to go and change a blend mode. In this case, if I go for add, it does exactly what I was aiming for. Great. So let's push this setting a little bit further. I think next thing that I want to add to this setup is a color LUT. We have several of them available here in resources. So I'm just going to pull in the first one. And I think I'm going to connect it to the composite sources. There we go. So color LUTs, just like video sources, can be toggled through via dropdown until you find the one that you like. So any and all color LUTs that you have in your resources will be available here in the dropdown. I'm quite happy with the 002 color LUT. So color LUTs are actually industry standard grading tools. You can find quite a few of them available online. I'm a big fan of Grayscale Gorilla LUTs. It's a little bit of an investment, but it's definitely worth it. You can probably find quite a few of them available for free as well, or you can build your own. You can do that via Photoshop or DaVinci Resolve or quite a few other various options. Right, let's change some post effects here. I think I'm going to get rid of the dot matrix for now. And I think I'm going to go for data mosh again, as we did in the previous setting. So I'm going to connect it here to the first video null. I'm actually quite happy with the way it looks by default, but I think I'm going to go ahead and tick on use scene motion vectors. Let's see if any other blend mode would make it look a bit nicer. In fact, I think the default blend is just alright. I'm going to keep it at that. I'm going to add some post effects to the second video null too. I think here I will go for frame difference. And I think I'm going to set the number of frames to 25. Let's toggle through the different blend modes. Min, max, max. I think minimum or the min looks much better. So this is getting somewhere. This is getting a little bit more exciting. Right, I think I like where this is going, but I think we should address the readability of this setting. It's a little bit hard to make out this person in the image. Now, we are used to it by now, so we actually understand what's going on, but the person seeing this image first time might have a difficulty understanding what exactly do they see. So a good way around it, or one of the tricks that I use, is the matte workflow. So let's add an extra image 2D. As I connect a new image 2D to the root, I see that it's overtaking the design. So all of a sudden, again, we have a white quad. And that's stacking order. Depending on where you leave your nodes, it either renders behind the design that we created or in front. In this case, I want this to render in front. I think now I'm going to grab the video loader and I'm going to place it a little bit lower here. I want to use that same video loader for this image 2D. Before I connect those two, I don't want to connect them directly. I think I'm going to add a video null in between, just so we can attach any and all post effects in between if we want to. Right, let's move this a little bit to the side too, so we see the connections better. Great. So, to be able to use a matte workflow, or in our case, alpha image workflow, we need some kind of a source to drive the visibility of the top layer and the bottom layer. I think I'm going to go for generator. A perfect way to illustrate this case is to use something like star. So I'm going to grab a star generator. I'm going to shift double click to preview how it looks. I'm going to pipe it into the second input alpha image. And as you can see now, this black and white pass is driving the visibility of the top and bottom layer. I think it would be nice to shape it up a little bit. On the scale Y, I'm going to use a small formula, 16 divided by 9. And I think I'm going to bump up the numbers here so it matches our video. I think it's going to be 1920 by 1080. There we go. So now if I toggle it on and off, because we have here a preview and viewport option, you can see exactly what's going on. So where we see the white color, it's the top layer, and when we see the alpha, it's the layer beneath. So obviously much better choice than star here would be fractal noise. So I'm going to grab fractal noise generator. I'm going to connect it to the same input, shift double click it to expand it, and I'm going to use the preview in the viewport option to actually further shape it so it looks a little bit more interesting or a little bit closer to the setting that we have. So first of all, let's make it into a 16:9 setting so it fills the whole canvas, so 1920 by 1080 on the width and height. And maybe let's add some gain. I think the noise scale is a little bit too big. The blobs could be quite bigger in scale, and there could be less of them. There we go. I'm quite happy with this. So now if I tick off the preview in the viewport, I will see that I can see that the white blobs are the layer in front and the alpha is the layer behind. There we go. With a very little effort, we actually introduced quite a bit of readability to this design. Okay, let's add a couple more things. Let's move on. You remember I mentioned that every single video loader has a preview in the viewport option. Well, so does the video nulls. So if you want to work on specific iteration or specific part of the chain, you can always press on the video null that you are interested in, click on preview in the viewport, and you will see exactly how that video null or how that piece of the processing chain looks. Now be aware, you should always tick it off once you're done editing. In the beginning of the chapter, I briefly mentioned that every single image 2D has its own blend mode. Let's take advantage of that. Let's add yet one more image 2D to the scene. So I'm going to connect it to the root. And again, I'm going to add a null in between source and the image 2Ds, just so I can add some post effects if I want to. If I was to apply post effects straight on the video loader, it would affect all the rest of the chain. That's why I always want to have a null in between. So I'm gonna shift double click to see exactly how this video null looks. And I think I'm gonna apply threshold here. I don't want to output the color, I just want to output the mask. I literally just want to see a black and white pass. I think I might tweak a little bit the threshold and fall off range, so it would be a little bit slicker. So maybe 0.05 on fall off and 0.5 on threshold setting. Yeah, that's all right. I do want this to be in color, so I'm gonna go for tint option here. And I think I'm gonna make it red. Right, I think I'm done with altering this look. Now I can come back to the image 2D and choose another type of blend mode. So all of a sudden, designs that I had in the back and this new image 2D actually is merging together to make one unified look. Okay, let's recap the most important things we discussed in this setup right here. We used video nulls, and we applied different post effects on those video nulls. We brought them back together with a composite source, and in a composite source we have blend modes that we can choose from. And of course we have a blend amount slider if we want to choose one or the other one as a main rendering output. Then we tried out the alpha image, which is literally a matte workflow here in Notch. And then we revisited the blend modes in image 2D. So let's spend a little bit more time here. Let's add some creative post effects. And once you're done with your design, I will meet you in the next workshop where we're going to talk about live green screen keying. Welcome back to the video compositing chapter of this Notch Essential course. Now, this will be our last workshop in this chapter, and we're going to talk about green screen keying. This is more or less the setup that we're after. So with that said, I think we're ready to make a new layer and get started. I will insert a new layer now, and I'm going to call this Chroma key. So the first node that I want to bring into the node graph is going to be image 2D. So this is a starting point, just like in all the previous workshops. We do need a quad to output our video to. And I see that in my resources, I have one file called green screen sample. So this is exactly what I'm going to use for this workshop. So I'm connecting it to the first input video node. And here we are. We have a video with a green screen in the back. Great. So the next step will be adding a Chroma key node, and I'm going to apply it straight on the video loader. As I do, I see that it's starting to work. That's great. And now everything what we see here in the background black is actually alpha. So for us to be able to see things a little bit better and make this workshop a little bit easier, I propose we build a little tile sheet in the back so we can differentiate from the video and the background. So I'm going to grab another image 2D. And I'm going to connect it to the root. Now, as always, it's important to remember the stacking order. If the new image 2D is in front of the old one, it will just overwrite the setting. So we definitely want this in the back. I'm going to hold it here. And now we need a tile generator to fill this white quad. So I'm going to connect it to the first input. Yep, it's working. That's great. There are several changes that I want to make to this tile node. So first of all, I'm going to set the width and height to 1920 by 1080. I do want to use the number tiles, and I want to have 19 on the property X, and I want to have 10 on the property Y. There we go. It is set to random now. I actually want this on a chessboard pattern, and I'm going to change the colors a little bit. So I'm going to dim the white. And I'm going to make sure that the bottom color or the second color is gray. There we go. This definitely works. Okay, so now we are ready with the initial setup. Let's talk about Chroma key node. As you see, there's quite a few properties available for us here in this node. Most important thing to remember while working with Chroma key node is the consecutive order of operations. So for the best results, I would always recommend that you start with the first panel and then move to the second, third, so on and so forward. Because as we are going through these panels, we are refining the keyer, we are refining the information that Notch has to process. So the first panel right here is the clean plate generator. So we have two options to preview it. First of all, we can see the clean plate pixels. And then another option we have is the show generated clean plate. So let's start with the first one, show contributing clean plate pixels. In this panel right here, we have to make sure that we build a very nice solid green or solid chroma plate for Notch to refer to. So in this case, our task is just to build something that is completely green and has no aberrations, no color spills, as you see here. So I think I'm going to tweak the clean plate inclusion threshold to something like 0.19. That looks rather good. Okay, let's move on to the clean plate contributing weight. And let's maybe reduce this a little bit. Okay, let's preview the clean plate pixels. That looks good. Generate a clean plate. I think this definitely works. Maybe a little bit more here. There we go. So before we move on to the next panel, I just want to mention that there are several options when it comes to the actual chroma color. So we're not bound to use just green color. We can actually use blue, or we can use auto-generated color via color picker. So if we're using the color picker as a hint, we have three options. We can use color picker, which is native to Notch, then we can use Windows color picker, or we can use the picker that allows us to pick and choose any color that is available for us in the viewport. So basically I'm just pressing on a P and dragging on the viewport. I'm quite happy with the default setting, auto generate from greens, so I'm just gonna stick with that. Right, let's move on to the second panel, fully keyed areas. I'm gonna tick on show fully keyed areas, and I see that there's a red color all over the place in this setting right here. The reason why we have this red color is because Notch is defining where in this footage the chroma color is solid. So everything that is red is regarded as chroma. We can actually tweak this a little bit. In fact, I think that default is rather good. I don't want to overdo it because I actually want to further refine these areas right here, where we see the hair, where we see the cloth. So we're basically eliminating all the areas that we don't want to tweak any further with any other panels that we have here in the list. Great, I think this works. Let's move on to the solid areas, and let's preview the solid areas. So what does solid areas bracket do? Well, this parameter takes the hue color from the clean plate and compares it with the pixels available while only using hue and saturation. And if they are in certain tolerance range, then pixels are interpreted as solid. So basically it's the opposite operation of what we were doing with the previous setting, which is fully keyed areas. So if in a fully keyed areas we're defining where is chroma, in the solid areas we're defining where is the talent or where is the object that we want to preserve. I think we're quite happy here with the defaults. I don't even think we need to tweak the solid areas that much. In fact, the only property that I want to tweak is the saturation difference threshold. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit. So in this specific sample, it doesn't really make that much of a difference even when I'm tweaking it on the screen. So here in the same panel, we have another property, which is called harden interiors. This one comes very handy if you're working with the footage that has some holes in your talent or in your object. So this literally fills in, hardens the interiors, and you get rid of the spills. Now in our case, it's quite all right. We don't need to do that. I think I'm going to leave it ticked off. So I'm going to tick off the show solid areas as well. Okay, this is becoming much better. I start to see more details in the edges, in the hair, and in the cloth. That's great. Okay, let's move on to the next bracket, transparencies and edges. Think of this as a contrast setting for the overall node. It's more or less the standard color correction that applies on this specific node. So we can actually preview the output matte and we can see how our tweaks are changing the looks of this setting. Now in this case, I don't think I need to make any alterations here at all, so I'm going to set it back to the defaults. And I will mention that we have a property here called shrink transparency edge. There might be cases where you have video footage that has a small green 1 pixel outline around the whole talent or the object. So if you tick that property on and you tweak its settings, you will be able to get rid of that 1 pixel outline. So that's quite a handy property, shrink transparency edges. Moving further, we have spill suppression. This is a simple color mixer. It tries to get rid of the green. It looks for areas where the green is strongest and replaces it with the average of the blue and red. I would always tick that on. I think it's actually quite handy. It always makes the setting look a little bit better. Now we do have a reflection suppression setting right here too, but since we don't have any reflective objects or areas in this footage, we don't really need to tick that on. We don't need to alter it at all. And then the last bracket that we have here is the smoothing and refinement. So temporal smoothing allows Notch to preserve a little bit more of compute power. So basically you're reducing the load on your GPU by ticking that on. So I would always recommend doing that. Then we have smooth transparency. I think we definitely want this because we have some transparencies here, and I'm going to bump it quite high. I'm going to set it to 20. And then we have smoothing for the color. So I'm going to tick that on as well, and I'm going to bump it quite high as well. There we go. This is more or less ready. We have keyed out this footage to a point where we can further work with the setting and perhaps add some creative post effects. If you're interested in learning more about Chroma Key Node, please visit Notch VFX YouTube channel. We have several tutorials there addressing more complex, more advanced Chroma Key Node use cases. Right, so with the Chroma Key Node setup complete, I think we're ready to make this a little bit more interesting. So I think I'm gonna start by mirroring this footage. Let's make sure that we have two ladies dancing here. So I'm gonna grab a mirror node. I'm gonna connect this straight to the video loader. Right, I see that the mirror node is doing its job, but I don't necessarily like how it's mirroring this footage. So I'm gonna rotate it 180 degrees. There we go. This looks a little bit more interesting, a little bit more dynamic. So now with that done, I'm gonna come back to the backplate. So I'm gonna change some things in this image 2D. I don't necessarily want the tiles anymore. So I'm pressing Ctrl Shift and I'm gonna unhook this tile node. And I'm gonna go for something else. I'm gonna go for fractal noise. So I'm gonna connect the fractal noise to the image 2D. And I'm gonna make sure that it's 1920 and 1080 in width and height. And I'm gonna change the noise type to the warped 3. There we go. This is a little bit more interesting, maybe a bit more amount, so it's a little bit more contrasty. It's quite fast in its animation, so I'm going to reduce the animation speed. Let's set it really, really small, just so it moves barely here in the back. In fact, I think it would be nice if this fractal noise would be mirrored as well. So I'm going to grab a mirror post effect and I'm going to apply it on the fractal noise too. There we go. Let's move it a little bit higher here. Well, this is starting to look like somewhat of a design. That's great. Next thing that I want to do here is perhaps change the fractal noise color. So I'm gonna go for light blue. I think that will look much better here. There we go. I think what would tie together the footage in the front and the footage in the back is some kind of a color grade, so color LUT. I have several options here, so I'm just gonna grab first one from the list and I'm gonna cycle through and see whichever the one fits this setting best. I think 003.cube looks quite nice. Perhaps let's set it halfway, so blend amount 0.5. Yeah, this definitely works. I think the background could be a little bit more abstract. So perhaps we can add one more post effect here for the background. Something like dot matrix, for instance. So let's apply it straight on a fractal noise. And let's see if there's a blend mode that would make this look a little bit better. Maybe additive. And what about changing the mode to color and scale? There we go. I think I'm quite happy with this look as it is now. Obviously, you don't have to stop. You can add more post effects. This is very much up to you. We spent a good half an hour talking about posts in this chapter. Obviously, half an hour is not enough of time to learn everything there is to learn about post effects. So now it's up to you to spend a little bit of time trying out different combinations and different post effects in your scenes and, well, pick your favorites. So with that said, I think we're done in this chapter and we're gonna move on to 3D world and we're gonna start by talking about lights. So whenever you're ready, I'm looking forward to see you there.